People joining. All right, we'll give it maybe about another 30 seconds and then we'll start. Good morning, everyone. I think we're going to go ahead and start. I see a couple of people still joining us, but in order to keep our day on track, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone, to PWSA USA's first Sleep Summit. We're very excited. We have a full day ahead of us. I'm Paige Rivard. I'm the CEO of PWSA USA. Also mom to Jake, who's age 12, living with PWS and a second rare genetic disorder. So welcome, everybody. And as many of you are aware, sleep issues are common in Prader-Willi syndrome. And the issues can range from things like lack of REM sleep, central and obstructive sleep apnea, daytime sleepiness, cataplexy, narcolepsy, just to name a few. And we're so excited to have amazing speakers today who are specialists in the area of sleep, sharing their knowledge with us throughout the day. So there will be time at the end of this session for Q&A. If you have questions, go ahead and type them into the Q&A section. The chat will be disabled, and we will get to questions at the end of the presentation. Also, this session and all sessions today will be recorded and posted to our YouTube channel and social media for viewing. We're hoping by tomorrow, but maybe, possibly end of week, depending on how things go today. I'd also like to say a very special thank you to our sponsor, Harmony Biosciences, for helping make this valuable Sleep Summit available to our community. I think we're all going to learn a lot today, have opportunities to ask questions. So I'm very excited. Without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our first speaker today. Our first speaker, Matt Horsnell. Matt is the community director for Trend, and Matt will be presenting on using social media to shed light on sleep problems associated with PWS. Matt is the father of 3 and is living with type 1 narcolepsy with cataplexy. And as community director, Matt amplifies and cultivates insights from the voices of the rare disease groups. He also consults on actigraphy solutions for sleep community using wearable technology. From scientific research to artwork to poetry to strength, Matt is recognized throughout the community as a narcolepsy renaissance man. He serves as facilitator for Wake Up Narcolepsy online small groups. He is a leading patient advocate in narcolepsy, focusing on mental health awareness and legislative efforts. He also has the longest hashtag in narcolepsy, and I won't read all of that, but he has a very long hashtag. So Matt, welcome, and I will turn it over to you to get our Sleep Summit started today.
Thank you so much, Paige. Thank you, Stacy, and everybody who's attending. Just for the record, the hashtag is world's strongest person having narcolepsy with cataplexy. It's somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but in essence, it's saying that anytime anybody has the strength or the ability to wake up and get a workout in, they deserve recognition for the strength that they displayed on that day. So today, just want to go ahead and talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing. This is you guys may recognize her. I think I saw her mom there in the audience. This is Justice. One of the reasons I love this picture is it really encapsulates what Trend tries to do, and that's create an aggregate voice for the community using people from across the country and across the globe in many cases. So today we're going to be talking about the Prader-Willi syndrome research that we've been doing, and just kind of the general basis of what Trend does. So next slide, please. So Maria presented this the other day, and I thought it was so invaluable when it comes to talking about how we need a better understanding of diseases in the rare disease space. So this was taken from the Mayo Clinic, and you guys can read that there. Prader-Willi syndrome is a rare genetic disorder that results in a number of physical, mental, and behavioral problems. A key feature of Prader-Willi is a constant sense of hunger that usually begins at about age 2. People with Prader-Willi syndrome want to eat constantly because they never feel full, and they have trouble controlling their weight. Many complications of Prader-Willi syndrome are due to obesity. Now, one of the things that the takeaway there, if someone were just looking at that without any understanding of the disease, that would be their sole understanding of it. And this is the Mayo Clinic, one of the premier academic institutions across the country, or clinical institutions across the country. And this is how they're portraying the condition. And as parents and caregivers of someone with Prader-Willi, I'm sure you guys are already picking that apart, realizing that that's a very incomplete picture of what it's like to live with Prader-Willi. And so that's why we turn to the process we have at Trend. So next slide, please. So again, one of the things that we have is this limited disease understanding. And so there are consequences to that. From social stigma, that's a huge issue that I deal with living with narcolepsy, to this self-fulfilling prophecy. So you see that there's going to be a problem, and oftentimes medication and treatment options take us down that path because that's how we're designed to treat these problems. And then failed clinical trials. So when we have these arbitrary endpoints to studies and research, we don't truly find solutions to all of the problems that are faced in different conditions. This is a great quote from Noam Chomsky that's a personal favorite of ours. Science is a bit of a joke about the drunk who's looking under a lamppost for a key that you lost on the other side of the street, because that's where the light is. He has no other choice. So next slide. So this is called the streetlight effect, and it's an example of observational bias. So again, you've got this man who's looking for his keys, and he's looking for it under the light, not because that's where he lost the keys, but because that is where the visual spectrum is focused. He can't see his keys anywhere else. So the goal of Trend is to take that light and start shining it in different corners of the rare disease communities to help get a broader understanding about what's going on. Because if we can't illuminate it, we're not going to really be able to solve any problems outside of what's right in front of us. So next slide. Okay, so again, turning on the lights. So Trend has a very refined approach. We try to use an ethical framework that's built on trusted relationships. So we reach out, we develop relationships with the communities we work with. We identify social data sources. The data that we're going to be showing today is from Facebook. We also use open source data from Reddit as well. And we reach a consensus agreement with these groups that we collaborate with so that we can access the data. The conversation analysis, we run it through our engine. It's a very sophisticated AI engine that helps to get a better understanding using machine learning and natural language processing to expand our understanding of these conditions. So we have what's called a lexical knowledge base, which is a proprietary approach we use. So when people are talking with their physicians, they're not necessarily using medical terms. And in order to understand what's going on with patient communities, it's really critical that we teach both our computers, but also the professional groups we're working with. What are people saying? When I say head bob or I drop something with my hands, I define myself as clumsy. I might be giving insight that I have a condition called cataplexy. And until you can connect those two conversation points, it's hard to move forward. We use an approach called an evidence accelerator. So we've kind of evolved from doing just specific to individual disease states to using symptom-based approaches. So we're going to shine a light on entire symptoms and help increase our understanding across the board. The process is a bit in depth. It takes about 6 to 12 months to complete this process, and it involves a lot of collaboration with the groups. We can see the data, but we don't truly understand what the needs of the community are until we invite key opinion leaders like Stacy, like Paige, to come help us look at the data. And then ultimately the goal is to produce and publish peer-reviewed journals, to prevent posters at scientific conferences, and to use this data for improved medical product development, so helping pharma to create new treatment options. So next slide. So this is an example of some of the work that we do. And this is one that we've just recently done on gout. And I chose this just because it's a great representative of the work that we're trying to accomplish. You've got the word cloud there, which is a great way to help understand what's being said. I love how it kind of reflects the words popping out left and right. So you get to see these are the main terms that are popping out when we were researching gout. And it helped us get a better understanding of that pain was a big issue that people were talking about, and then also the mental health component. So again, we look at the data, we find the trends that are kind of emerging. We focus that selection. So we really look at what we want to go with, and then we go ahead and we produce the real world that evidence data that we're going to present at a conference. And this one's going to be presented at an ACR conference, which is American College of Rheumatology in 2022. So next slide. So sleep and rare. This is the process that really began the work that brought us here today. This has been going on for years. The foundation of this project began in 2018, and that's when we started exploring sleep and Prader-Willi syndrome. So we created this community voice report, which I'll be happy to make sure that Paige and Stacy have available if you want to take a look at that. And we started to kind of advance that process to where we are today, which is the sleep and rare process. In the Journal of Clinical Sleep Medicine, the diagnosis and management of sleep disorders and Prader-Willi syndrome came out in June of 2022. Again, that's working towards a better understanding of identifying the sleep issues related in Prader-Willi, and that's a pretty big accomplishment. Journal of Clinical Sleep Medicine is one of the foundational research journals for sleep, and so to get our work published there, I think is a huge step. And again, right now we're at a stage of helping to finish up the sleep and rare project, which Prader-Willi has been a big part of. PWSA USA in particular has been very helpful in understanding that. And again, these are two of the pharma companies that are sponsoring us, Harmony Biosciences, which again is really grateful for the work that they're doing, sponsoring this sleep summit as well. And then Avadale Pharmaceuticals, which is helping us with some of the narcolepsy related research as well. And as you can see, back in 2018, the whole idea of using pitolisant for Prader-Willi was something that was novel, and there was some compassionate use exemptions that were granted. And now you see in 2020, Harmony actually initiates a trial for, excuse me, for pitolisant, which is brand name Wakix for Prader-Willi. So this gives you a great linear path of how we start at one endpoint, we identify there's a problem. And then over the course of a few years, we're actually continuing to tease out insights. There was an FDA basket trial focused on rare disease that we've talked about. We presented at World Sleep, Journal of Clinical Sleep Medicine. And then the exciting thing is where are we going to do, where we can go next, and what are we going to be doing? So next slide. So I wanted to touch base on the condition that I live with, and then the overlap there with the community with Prader-Willi. And so it's narcolepsy with cataplexy. So this is a strong connection that our work has helped establish and identify, and that's people with Prader-Willi have a strong overlap with narcolepsy. It's a chronic neurological disorder of the sleep-wake cycle. It does affect about 1 in 2,000 people. And it has a pentat of symptoms. That would be 5 symptoms for those of you in the medical lexicon there. So excessive daytime sleepiness is something that we all share. Anybody with narcolepsy, whether it be without cataplexy or with cataplexy, experiences profound, debilitating daytime sleepiness. It's analogous to waking up as if you hadn't slept for 48 hours and then having periods throughout the day as if you hadn't slept for 72. It's characterized also by disrupted nighttime sleep. It's that disrupted sleep that actually causes that excessive daytime sleepiness. Hypnagogic and hypnopompic hallucinations. So those are visual, auditory, or tactile hallucinations that take place either coming into sleep or coming out of sleep. So it's our brain overlapping dreams with reality. So that, clear distinction that most people experience is blurred. So I wake up and I feel as if I have somebody pushing on my chest. I have one where a lady falls on top of me and I can actually feel her hair tickling my neck. And that's, for me, characterized with sleep paralysis as well. And so that's, again, my body has a disrupted paralysis during sleep. So it still exists when I wake up. So I wake up, I should be moving, but my body's telling me, nope, you're still asleep. And then cataplexy is almost the flip of that. So it's an emotional response associated with that has involuntary loss of muscle tone associated with it. So if you guys see me out in public, do not scare me. Do not sneak up behind me and say boo. If you've had a chance to see me celebrate my kids playing soccer, that's another time when I'll have both slurred speech, that's a partial cataplexy response. I'll drop something with my hands. I'll have head bobs throughout the day. If I go to a really funny movie and I start doing a belly laugh, it's a good chance I'm gonna do head bobs throughout that entire experience. And then a full body episode would be where you actually fall down completely and you're out. It feels like minutes, but in reality, for most people, it's about anywhere between 15 seconds to about a minute and 30. And the diagnosis. So the two standards that we have, the two tests we have here in the States that are commonly used are the polysomnography, which is an overnight sleep study, and then a multi-sleep latency test, or the MSLT, which is a period of 5 naps spaced out over a day, where you space every 2 hours, you take a 15-minute nap. If you go into REM sleep, which is that rapid eye movement sleep, in under 8 minutes in 2 of those tests, that's an official narcolepsy diagnosis. Cataplexy being a self-reported symptom. Overseas, they have a slightly different process. It's not as available here because it's a little bit intrusive, but they do a genetic study. They found that there's this particular gene that 97% of people with narcolepsy with cataplexy have. The thing is that about 25% of the population also has the gene, but it helps them screen out if this is even a possibility. And then they do a lumbar puncture to get cerebral spinal fluid levels of hypocretin. And so it has to be below the threshold. And what causes it? The real answer is we don't entirely know what causes it. We have some really good ideas. For me, my doctors and I have looked back and we realized that a strep infection, where I was a carrier for a couple of years, likely triggered the autoimmune response that caused my body to wipe out my orexin or hypocretin levels. Those terms are interchangeable. The two separate research groups discovered the same neurotransmitter during the same year, and so the terms get thrown around back and forth. But physical trauma has also been a cause of it. The orexin and hypocretin are produced in your hypothalamus, which is a peanut-sized organ that sits at the inside your brain fairly deep. So for a physical trauma to cause damage to the hypothalamus, it would have to be pretty substantial. But that's not to say that encephalitis or some other inflammation couldn't also cause some physical trauma to the hypothalamus as well. And so that molecule right there is actually a 3D representation of what I don't have in my brain. So something of a longing to one day have some hypocretin in there. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about data sources and methods. And so again, looking back to what we talked about in terms of the trends process, this is how we go about doing it. So next slide. So what we try to do is we have a process harnessing the power of the AI. So we have descriptive statistics, we identify trends, we use topic models, and then we go into information extraction. So we start to identify which groups or entities that we want to incorporate. We start doing comparisons against the data itself, and then we start looking at comparisons across different disease states. And then we look at a co-occurrence network. And so that's going to chart out words that take place in conjunction very frequently. So 1 or 2 word sleep combination or combinations about sleep, sometimes 3 word combinations as well. And then we just we help tease out some sub networks there. So next slide. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the groups that we have data for. If you notice, the top 2 We actually, Facebook changed their policies. We used to be able to extract full histories of groups. And if you notice there, you have post versus comments. So that's the number of posts versus the number of comments. The most important point for us is actual comments. So we're looking to really see what the interaction is between different groups. And currently the data that we're pulling moving forward is the PWSA USA groups, but we did want to let you know that there was some other group data that was going to be used in this interpretation. So next slide. Data review, trends and topics. So again, next slide, please. So this is the top 10 word choices associated with Prader-Willi syndrome. I love this because it not only shows a broad overview, but it also shows one of the reasons why we need to have a broad data set for group. You can notice things like breastfeeding, teething. We have a lot of comments right now in the younger group, so your early childhood groups, and so that kind of makes the data reflected there in the actual topics. And so we categorize these under different topics. You see sleep apnea is a huge topic there. We in the next slide, you're going to see some more on sleep as well. But these are just the top topics that we were able to pull out. You see acid reflux is a big issue that a lot of people experience, which coincidentally actually is often associated with sleep apnea as well. And then you have here, everybody talks about insurance issues, and so that inevitably is going to come up. You see the genotropin, so the growth hormone use is reflected there in the data. And then unfortunately, you see the NICU. So when your child's born, you see some of that data start to come out. The need for vision therapy, the need for speech therapy, and again, diet, something that we talk about a lot in narcolepsy, and you see it's reflected here. So this just gives us a broad overview, and those delineations at the bottom are going out by logarithmic rate. So next slide, please. So again, we're able to push aside some of the other conversations. We keep track of all that, and then we target really specifically on sleep. So these are the top 10 sleep topics associated with Prader-Willi. You see there right off the top, you have sleep apnea and CPAP. You have narcolepsy with cataplexy. You have issues related to sleep apnea. You have the teeth grinding issue with it, which is a huge issue that people deal with. It's also associated with sleep apnea as well. And then conversations about naps, which is a very important approach if your child does have a sleep disorder, to better understand how naps can be catered to help them function better. And then night terrors. And I wanted to, this harkens back to something that we talked, a couple points we talked about, and that is the lexical analysis. So when people are talking about these night terror incidents, these screaming, crying, night terrors, all of that can also be looked at through a lens of what symptom that might be representing. And I'm not saying that all of these are representative of hypnagogic or hypnopompic hallucinations, but knowing that there's an overlap of reality with dreams to these night terrors, you can see how some of that data can be very important to understand how people are talking about it versus what the medical community is actually looking at for answers. So next slide, please. So love the word cloud approach that we use. The colors there are just represent, there's no particular color code here. It's just how our software pulls these out. But these are the common words that show up in our research. And it's important there to understand that, there's a lot of different reasons why somebody might be using these words, but I like to look at it and just look at some of the big words there that are reflective of the size. You've got help. I made the comment the other day during a presentation, that help wasn't a 4-letter word. In fact, it is, but it's a very hard word for me to say. But when people are reaching out for help, it has a profound impact on what that can mean for mental health reasons. And so understanding the context of the words is helpful. Love, family, you see doctor, questions, GH. Even though some of the larger words obviously jump out at you the most, one of the really cool things that we can do at Trend is really focus our research efforts into individual words. So we had a sleep cloud or a word cloud for narcolepsy, and brain cloud was a relatively small word by comparison in the chart, but we were able to do a complete report and present that at World Sleep just on brain fog itself. So we can take a small concept and we can really dig down and help better understand even some of these small aspects. So just kind of a cool representation of what is possible with this approach. So next slide, please. And this is that co-occurrence network that I referred to. So each red dot is reflected of sleep. The yellows are actual mental health issues. If you can see, there's two co-occurrence networks here that actually kind of overlap that we pull it out of. So sleep apnea was a very large topic source. And you see sleepiness, another word for sleepiness in the medical language is hypersomnia. And so you can kind of start to see where all of these conditions start to really connect. And you see that, for sleepiness and hypersomnia and sleep apnea, you see issues with anxiety. It makes sense. You see that the sleep apnea connection with narcolepsy. So the thickness of the line is a representative of the deepness of the connection. And then you can see too where the different groups actually combine there together. Hypotonia, muscle weakness being included, acid reflux, side effect. All of these are kind of reflective of the work that we can do. So we can pick out individual topics here and do some more in-depth research. But I love seeing just in a graph format like how all of this connects. And one of the other great parts of this is you get to see how complex these conditions actually are and how complex these co-occurrence networks can be. So next slide, please. So this is just a representation of the data collected. So this is over the course of the past 10 years. You can see there was a drop there, and that drop wasn't because there wasn't conversations taking place. That drop there was because we weren't actively archiving. And that's one of the really important aspects of the work that we do is we need to consistently archive the data. And I just want to applaud Stacy and Paige for being very helpful in making sure that we have access to this data and are able to keep it up, because that's a pretty key gap there. And so moving forward, you don't have to worry about seeing those gaps because you're going to have continued collaboration. And again, as you notice, conversations kind of go up and down across the board. You see some statistical outliers of a lot of comments in a particular day. Sometimes it's fun to go back and kind of retroactively try to guess what may have happened that caused an abundance of comments, but just kind of reflective again of you see data, the conversations kind of going throughout the year. Next slide, please. So topic word scores, again, these were some of the top ones that we looked at. And again, all of these graphs are not to scale, but for the sake of display, we like to put them on there together, approximately the same. So you can kind of see again the displays in the conversation. You've got growth hormones, sleep apnea is right up there. And you get to see just narcolepsy with cataplexy is mentioned, at a higher rate compared to cataplexy with narcolepsy. So that's just an example there. Again, just looking a little bit more at each one of those topics we talked about. Next slide. I love this starburst graph because it's a great way of seeing how, it's very helpful when you overlap different conditions too, but it's a great way to see how comments are spread out. And so here, symptoms in PWS, fever came up very high. And then you see things like hypotonia, muscular weakness. You can see that it increases kind of exponentially compared to brain fog in this case. You see that fatigue and sleepiness is fairly far out there on the scale as well. And again, fatigue and sleepiness are often used interchangeably, but they can also mean slightly different things. But combining them for the sake of this starburst is what was the point there. And then if you go to the next slide, you see sleep conditions in PWS. So we try to break it down into the common categories, sleep apnea, you see there's an abundance of people there with sleep apnea. Sleepiness and hypersomnia, again, which is a word that's used. Narcolepsy is a form of hypersomnia, I guess is the best way to put it. Cataplexy only shows up with narcolepsy. So anytime you're seeing those combined, you can assume that they're talking about the same thing. So if you actually were to combine cataplexy, narcolepsy, and sleepiness and hypersomnia, you can see how that would extend out the slide quite a bit, or that bar graph quite a bit. All right, next slide. Mental conditions with Prader-Willi, or mental health comorbid conditions. And you see that anxiety is a big one there. We use this tool when we were doing the sleep and rare evidence accelerator, comparing multiple conditions, and so much of that anxiety was consistent across all of the groups. Depression less so. An important note here too, when we're looking at data like this, for many of the groups here, it's going to be the caregiver talking about it. When we find that people talk about their own experience, they usually use more words like depression. When they're talking about their children's experience, stress and anxiety come up. For themselves, it's usually calling it stress, and anxiety, it's referring to their kids. And then you can kind of see how it spans the gamut. ED stands for eating disorders. So just wanted to clarify that, because it could have a bunch of different meanings there. But anxiety, stress, you see there's conversations about autism. Tears, so that's just tearful, would be associated again with sadness in most cases. And then you've got behavioral problems and fears, and that kind of wraps out most of what the issues there that consolidate the mental health conditions. Next slide. And then this is a really important tool, especially when it comes to understanding conditions. Where are people going to get their answers? And you see, by and large, you've got endocrinologists there. That's your largest answer. Pediatrician, it makes sense, because we're talking about primarily children here. And if you look down too, you see sleep specialists. It's at 213 compared to endocrinologists at 4,000. And I know that most of you are going to see an endocrinologist for helping manage this condition. But again, this also helps us understand too of who do we need to be talking to and communicating with about Prader-Willi and sleep. If most people are going to endocrinologists, that's who we need to be talking to. We don't need to be necessarily talking to sleep specialists, because if they're in the sleep specialist office, chances are they're at the right place. Dentist is actually another great place to look for sleep guidance, because teeth grinding is a big sign of sleep apnea. And so I've had a number of friends with sleep apnea who actually got referred to a sleep specialist by their dentist. And again, pediatrician, we want to talk to your pediatrician about sleep issues as well, because that's when you're getting these frequent encounters. Next slide. And then locations. I really like this because it gives us an idea of where people are talking about. And hospitals came up really high on that list. Again, some of the data that we have currently, and as we're growing, we're pulling in more data that will change a little bit, but is about when people are coming home. And so you see hospital, NICU, but you also see there's a lot of conversations about school. And for me, growing up, living with a sleep disorder, school was a huge issue for me because I couldn't stay awake. I actually went undiagnosed for 13 years. My onset was 12. My diagnosis was 25. And so there was a lot of problems and issues there. And so realizing that one place that you may want to focus some of the awareness efforts in school is a good step or a takeaway from this. So next slide. And then substances. This should not come as any surprise as far as the growth hormone, but this just gives us a really good understanding of what are people taking, and what substances are people talking about. And if you notice down there, actually pitolisant is it's like 6 down or 7 down there as a medication option, and then modafinil is followed closely behind. Those two are both used for sleepiness, and so you see a lot of sleepiness related medications in that top 7 or 8 related to Prader-Willi. And you see at the bottom, you also have some melatonin and Benadryl, but that's just kind of a side note. So let's go to the next slide, is questions and answers. And so I realized I threw a whole lot of information out there at you guys, and I just want to have a chance to kind of unpack it. One of the things I realized when I was giving the presentation, I want to make sure that I clarify what Trend's process is, and that is we take data and we de-identify it. So when we pull it, I alluded to this in one of the slides, but I wanted to give a little more clear answer to that. But we take information and the only way that we're able to archive it from Facebook is de-identified. So I don't know who is saying what. So that's the first step. We actually have a system that we run it through as well. So let's say Paige and I were in a conversation and I said at Paige, it'll actually say at redacted. So we have no way of knowing who I'm talking to or what I'm saying. So at all times, Trend values your privacy. And that's something that's really essential to me. I live with narcolepsy. I want to make sure that my data is kept private, confidential. And with Trend, there's really not a concern for me because I know that any data that they pull is not going to be directly tied to me. Any direct quotes we use on reports are actually aggregates, so combinations of multiple people saying a similar thing that we put together for the sake of creating some reports. So do we have any questions?
Hi, Matt. Thank you so much. I had a quick question about the data that you were presenting. You had mentioned that the bar graph represented the number of people talking about those topics. Is it actual people or is it the number of comments? So it could be.
That's a great question. Yeah, so that's the number of comments that we have. And so it's because we de-identify the data, it's hard to get an idea of the number of total people in a conversation. We do have a process that we can, when we use Reddit data, because that's openly available information, we can screen that out. Sometimes there might be 5 or 6 people who are making, hundreds of comments and skewing the data a little bit. But it's just something that we like to make note of when we see that in the data. But again, because we're de-identifying it, we don't really have a great way of making an estimation of who's saying what. That's, again, that de-identification process is both a plus in providing privacy and anonymity, but it does limit somewhat how we can extrapolate the information. But again, the comments, usually the comments are great because it gets some really good back and forth. It's not one person repeatedly posting a comment to their own post.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And I think, Matt, there was one question, and I think everybody can see it. I'm not sure, Stacy, if everybody can see the question, but it was, can this data be supplied to the FDA for them to use as an additional resource? And we did just meet with the FDA last week, and typically the FDA wants clinician data versus caregiver data, but any additional data we have like this, we always gather and use it as supplemental data with anything we're taking to the FDA. So in essence, it can be used.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's a great way to support findings that you already have. It reinforces, and it also helps you guys understand maybe some areas that are missing in clinician data so that you can, have conversations. And again, there's different approaches, quality of life analysis, that these can kind of be helpful in identifying to help get something across the finish line with the FDA.
And another question about, at some point, will this data be made available to all?
Yeah, so the end goal of all of our process is publication. And so we're going to work on getting a publication across the finish line. And then Trend is a certified B Corp. And so what that means is we place a really high emphasis on community investment. So Trend's great about both hiring people with rare diseases as well, but beyond that, it also means we want to give back a very large percentage of the work that we do. So while pharma funds the entire project, and they have access to some deep dives into information specifically. Overall, the vast majority of the information that we actually come up with, we put back out to the community at no charge. You know, we don't charge the patient groups that we work for because, you know, we want to provide them with answers and insights to what people are saying in their own groups. And so this process is very collaborative in that regard. And I alluded to it earlier. We can see the data, but your eyes are the ones that help us truly understand what's being said. It might really mean one thing to us. We're blessed to have Maria, who can see things through a caregiver of Prader-Willi eyes and a caregiver of a person with narcolepsy's eyes. So it's essential that we have a collaboration with the efforts.
Yeah. There's another question that says, what is the data on age of the onset of narcolepsy and Prader-Willi syndrome, and how we would capture that?
That's a great question, and I don't. So specifically, when it comes, so there's some serious limitations. There's an average delay of diagnosis that's 8 to 15 years for narcolepsy. I feel like we're getting a little bit better as we've moved on, and I would imagine it's probably a little bit higher in Prader-Willi, or at least right around at least the 8 to 10 year mark on the delay to diagnosis, because there are other considerations. You know, when you see your child and they're sleepy, you know, you may think it's related to something else and not necessarily, you know, a comorbid diagnosis of narcolepsy. I got diagnosed with depression. I got diagnosed with attention deficit disorder, and those medications masked the severity of the symptoms I was experiencing and prolonged that process. Typically 18 to 25 is your age of somebody who gets a narcolepsy diagnosis. With there has been a strong push, both in awareness efforts and with a few kind of nationwide triggers. H1N1 actually caused narcolepsy in a lot of people, and so that led to some earlier diagnoses. For children, cataplexy in children is often much more pronounced than cataplexy in adults. And it makes sense because children kind of unfiltered emotions at a lot of times. And so, you know, when they're upset, it's going to show. And so that's going to possibly manifest as a full body fall. A lot of times those cataplexy episodes can be misinterpreted as seizures. The sleepiness can be looked at as a behavioral issue. Oh, you're just saying you're sleepy because you don't want to, you know, do X. And so it's really important when your child, or you notice your child is having a lot of sleep issues. If they're having sleep issues, it makes sense to reach out and try and get an appointment with a sleep specialist. You know, I bounced around to 4 different psychiatrists, an internal medicine doctor and a pediatrician, all missed narcolepsy. And again, that's one of the reasons I choose to speak out and to help raise awareness, is because we have to lower that time, because there are treatment options that are available, increase quality of life.
Matt, there's a question, and I think you might have addressed it briefly, but you work with a lot of different rare disease communities, and do the pharma companies actually use your data?
Yes, actually, the pharma pays a high price. I would say a high price, but they hold our data in high esteem, because there is no voice like the patient voice. You guys as parents and caregivers know more about Prader-Willi than the majority of the physicians that you're going to see. And pharma companies understand that. They also understand that the sentiment, how people receive their medication, is very important. So they want to make sure that there's the public perception of you know, what medication they might be offering, what that is, where are some areas where they might want to focus some attention in terms of awareness, are very, very important. But again, you know, one of the reasons that we started collaborating with another company is they saw that we were talking about brain fog. And that issue alone created particular interest, because they wanted to know more about how their medication might impact brain fog. So it's a great launching point. They pay well for us to do these works, and we're very grateful for our pharmaceutical partners, because they allow us to do this research and make it publicly available. And that's a big part of any collaboration we do. You know, we're willing to take your money and do some of the work, but we have to give it back to the community.
Great, thank you. There's a couple more questions. One says, while many parents and caregivers rely on the endocrinologist to be the quarterback of their care team, there's a frustration when many sleep specialists who are unfamiliar with PWS kind of write off those sleep-related issues as just being connected to the hypotonia. Do you have any data, or can you point us in the direction of some data that can be shared with the families?
Yeah, so I alluded to it, the Journal of Clinical Sleep Medicine guidelines for Prader-Willi and sleep, and I'll make sure that Stacy and Paige have the ability to disseminate that approach, because it's something that you can take to your physician. The lead author on the paper is Dr. Kieran Maskey, there is no better pediatric narcolepsy expert across the globe. She's out of Boston, and she co-authored on that. And you're really starting to see a lot of prominent sleep doctors identify, oh, yeah, Prader-Willi, narcolepsy, those two things are starting to become more associated. And it's something that, again, work that you're doing here with the Sleep Summit is going to be a huge awareness tool that you can use and say, well, we need to bring attention to this issue. There's, again, I know you guys are probably tired of doing this, because I know I am, but you have to be your own advocate. You're going to have to advocate for your kids, and having tools like that, the Journal of Clinical Sleep Medicine article to take with you, both to help you to understand it, but also to say, look, this is already in the research. Look at it. You can't refute the authors who are on there in terms of their expertise on the topic.
Mm-hmm.
I think, Matt, speaking of journals and just research in general, one of the questions here is, do these efforts go through the IRB or any type of IRB process?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, basically we have a blanket IRB for the general data analysis, but every project that we have is covered either under an individual IRB or the blanket umbrella IRB, which was used for the community voice reports in that process. So yeah, or in order to get it across that research journal finish line, that's a step that we're proud to take.
Great.
Great.
Suggest seeing a neurologist for sleep issues?
So that's a great question. If your child has sleep apnea as well, I might suggest a pulmonologist. The main thing that I would look for is a doctor that's board certified in sleep medicine. So the American Academy of Sleep Medicine. So the initials you would look for is FAASM. So a fellow with the AASM are going to be at least knowledgeable or have the resources to diagnose narcolepsy. Personally, I've got a great sleep pulmonologist who actually was the past president of the ASM, so she understands so much about narcolepsy as well. If I was looking for a physician, a neurologist might be my first choice for the reasons that it is so neurological at its heart.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Great. I don't see any other questions right now. Matt, thank you for a wonderful presentation. I think all the data that you glean from social conversations is amazing. It's very fascinating to me. I love the word cloud. That was great. That great visual. But thank you for your time today and being our first presenter. And just again, I'm not seeing any other questions, so I think that we will end this session so we can start our next one. But thank you, and I know you've referenced a couple of different materials that we will make sure and get out to everybody after this is over as well.
I'll get those sent over to you right away. I did just want to thank you guys for asking Trent to be a part of this effort and for giving us the opportunity to share. Sleep holds a special place in my heart, and the ability to share that passion for sleep and to basically increase awareness and hopefully reduce time to diagnosis. If one person can go get a diagnosis because of this effort, you've enriched the life of someone tremendously. So just kudos to the work that you guys are doing. So just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Matt. It's been a pleasure working with you over the last few months through our focus meetings as well. There is one last question asking if it would be okay to share your slides with participants. How do you feel about that? Something? Okay.
Oh, look, I'll clear it with Maria, but I'm pretty sure that we have no problem since it's there's nothing that hasn't been presented already. the word cloud was new that we pulled up along with a few other slides, but I think that, yeah, that would be just fine. But yeah, awesome.
Great.
Very good. Well, I'll send
Yeah.
that to you guys. Thank you. Have a great rest of your summit and appreciate it.
Right.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Matt.
Matt.
All right, bye.